Hey everyone, welcome to Be the Change. My name is Lily Mott, and today's episode is about how change comes when you fit into your own box. This week's guest is Naabil Khan, and she is a medical student and a campaigner working on addressing health inequalities, among many other roles that we talk about throughout this episode. I learned so much through this conversation with Naabil, so without further ado, let's dive into this episode featuring Naabil Khan.
Hi, I'm Naabil. I'm a fourth year medical student. I'm currently situated in the UK, in Exeter, which is in the southwest of England. I am not only just a medical student, but I'd like to consider myself an activist and someone who really champions and campaigns for health inequalities and addressing those health inequalities in healthcare. So yeah, I guess that's a very, very quick elevator pitch for me, but I'm really interested in learning about patients' backgrounds, their experiences that make them unique, as well as what we can actually achieve together, both as a patient and professional. And yeah, that's me really.
I love that. I think that's a great background. Can you tell me a little bit about what made you interested in doing this work, in pursuing this field of study? Tell me a little bit about that background for you.
Yeah, I mean, it was a bit of a journey for me, because now I'm in my fourth year. I guess when you become a medical student, you try and find your niche, or if you don't find your niche, I mean, it's completely fine, but you find things that interest you. And for me, after the pandemic, I got into med school. So it was like the pandemic lockdown, and then it was the first year of med school for me. And I saw how prevalent health inequalities actually were, especially within the UK, and how that translated to what our space looked like in the medical education realm. And for me, it was about the fact that there was a lack of language usage, there was a lack of images, there was a lack of communication skills that was prevalent within medical school that allowed us to address these underserved and marginalized communities. And so that's how I got into it, really. And then, paired with the fact that I met so many influential figures who were already like leading the health inequalities conversation. People like Dr. Annabelle Sowamimo, Susan Coyle, Dwayne Hunt, they're all incredible healthcare professionals who have done so much work in, you know, working with and standing in solidarity with people who have felt disrespected or have felt unseen and unheard in the medical field. So that's kind of how I got into it, really.
I think that is such a great overview, but I think there's a lot to unpack there. So can you tell me about Skin for All? That's the first thing that I want to ask you about. Can you tell me about your work with that? Just share a little bit about what it is, what that journey was like. I'd love to learn a little bit more about that.
Yeah, of course. So Skin for All is my non-for-profit website, which is also an educational resource for both medical students and members of the public. And I created it in the summer of 2023 after my second year of university, because I was about to enter my first year of clinical study. So in the UK, we have a split between preclinical and clinical years in medicine. And I thought to myself, I'm engaging with patients now. I really need to find, or I need to, I think, engage with a hub that allows us to see the diversity of our patient groups. And I couldn't find any, or I could find very few. It would either be focused just on communication, or they'd be just focused on clinics, or they'd just be focused on, I don't know, videos. And I thought, is there a hub there where it's kind of like a one-stop shop for medical students, where if they want to know anything to do with diversity and, clinical pictures and stuff like that, can they visit it? And that's how I created Skin for All. It took around 3 months for me to make, and it was very much a trial and error kind of process where, there were certain designs I liked, certain designs I didn't like, and then I would always get that constant feedback from family and friends about how usable the website was itself. And then it ended up with a finalized project. I think it was middle of August 2023. And I was just super excited to showcase it to my peers. And I didn't think it would get as big as it did. I thought it would just be, like it would be distributed amongst my year group, and then it'd just be like, oh yeah, I did that a while ago. That's cool. But yeah, it's been like 2.5 years on, and it's just been an incredible process.
It looks amazing. I'm excited to learn more just because I admittedly don't know much about this realm. So I feel like I'm just going to pick your brain about a lot of it. But tell me about Future Doctor as well. You have so many different projects that you're working on. Tell me about that one.
Oh, Future Doctor. So that was created in my third year of medicine. And for me, not only am I really interested in the patient aspect of healthcare inequalities, I really wanted to know more about how medical students saw the culture within medical education. And by that, I mean that culture of gatekeeping, that culture of not having access to opportunities that other people may have access to. And speaking to so many different student groups and understanding the fact that they can't access certain opportunities because there is that there are those barriers there, and that may be social, that may be financial. I wanted to make sure that there was at least one barrier knocked down, with the sense that, with the Future Doctor newsletter, they'd receive an email and they'd be able to access all of these resources just by knowing that they exist in the first place, and then having links to look them up, and then obviously going for the opportunities if they felt like it was appropriate. But I wanted to break down that barrier and promote widening participation, especially when it came to those opportunities within medical education. Because again, like I said, the culture within medicine is very gatekeepy, and I know that's not really a word, but like um a lot of people tend to kind of, not promote that idea of shared solidarity or shared understanding of dissemination of knowledge. And for me, I'm super passionate about that because I think knowledge is power. And so by making sure that your peers are working alongside you, and they even pass you in certain fields, it's quite inspiring, quite motivational for you to always strive to do better. So that's why I created the Future Doctor newsletter.
I love that. I think it's such an important thing to point out as well, just to people who might not be in med school or might not know what that experience is like. I love kind of getting a little lens into that, but I think that is such an important issue that you're addressing. And I think a lot of this work is very much founded on your lived experience and you seeing something that bothered you or seeing a challenge that you faced and trying to figure out how you could solve that for yourself. And then, of course, for others who are going to be in your situation. So I think that's very cool. It fits with the name and the theme of this podcast very well. I think the glaring question for me when I'm hearing your story is how you manage to organize your time to do all of these things. How do you prioritize all of these different things and also have time for yourself? Have you dealt with burnout? Tell me a little bit about all of that.
It's a really good question, because I think what I found with a lot of people who do projects outside of medicine is that there's this facade that it's like, it's really easy. Like, it's really easy to organize your time. It's super easy to figure out what you need to prioritize and what you don't. And it's really not. Like, it's taken me 4 years to get to that stage where I felt fairly comfortable in terms of managing my time. And I think that's been through a combination of understanding what I need to prioritize at what time, kind of figuring out, deadlines, if they're increasingly, outstanding, or if, I've got time. It's about making sure that that perfectionist part of your brain doesn't override, the kind of rational aspect of your brain which needs to organize things. So I remember in first year, when I was just starting out in terms of balancing loads of stuff, I would say to myself, everything needs to be perfect, everything needs to be at like 200%. Whereas in reality, if you have the passion for a project, you're able to put 100% in, and when you actually present something or when you actually create something, that passion will seep through. It's not a case of you constantly have to hyperfixate on a project for it to be perfect. It could be perfect through the fact that it's human and through the fact that it's your own personal experience, and that's what makes it perfect. So yeah, once I got to fourth year, it was I guess it was a case of just trying to figure out, at the weekends, what do I like doing? And for me, what I like doing is actually advocating for people. So the extracurricular work, I don't really consider as extracurricular. I consider, that's my pastime as well. I find it really enjoyable. And like talking to my friends and family about the things I'm doing, especially with my friends, and just seeing, whether it's impacted their studies. It's really motivational. And I guess for organization, it's that work-life balance that I think a lot of people still struggle to achieve. And for me, it's kind of work hard, play hard. So like, if I have had a particularly stressful week at the weekend, I will just watch Netflix with my boyfriend, or I will just, I don't know, get takeaway and just relax and not think about work at all, because you need to avoid that burnout. And especially when you work when you work in any kind of degree, but when you have a degree as long as medicine, which is 5 years in the UK, you have to figure out a way in which you do avoid that burnout, because you can't be working at 110% all the time. You have to be at like, you can be at 80% some days, you can be at 0% other days. Like, there's no hard and fast rule. So I think, I guess if I want anyone to take anything away from this, it's that you shouldn't be so hard on yourself if you feel like you can't achieve that right organizational level. And like, if it is if it is a trial and error process, just allow that process to happen to you, because you'll figure it out along the way, and you'll figure out what works for you and what doesn't work for you.
I love that you said that your work that you're doing, like the extracurricular work, is also your hobby, because I think that you can see it when I'm talking to you, just how passionate you are about these things. And I think that that's amazing that you do have that joy for it and you have that passion that doesn't feel like work if it's something that you love doing. That's just a great message. So, what is next for you? When you look at the future, what is your goal? Are you going to be a doctor? What type of doctor are you going to be? Tell me all about that. You're going to be an amazing whatever you choose to do, but I'm thinking, maybe 5, 10 years. What's your plan for the future?
Oh, to be fair, I think my plan for the future is really, it's not like a specific goal or it's not a specific endpoint. It's just the lessons I think I learn. And I want to learn how to be a better leader. I want to be someone who people can go to for advice and who can go to for those tools and resources they need to create their own initiatives. I've started up my own academy, and this is a very recent development. But I've created an academy called Skin for All Academy, which has over 30 students from 27 different universities who are all interested in creating their own projects and their own resources that bridges that gap when it comes to healthcare inequalities. And I think for me, I just want to develop the skills I learned from that, leadership, teamwork, organization. And I guess when I quantify what future I want for myself, I quantify the idea of what kind of person I want to be in that future. And hopefully, fingers crossed, I'll become a doctor, but I don't know what I want to go into just yet. But I would love to be a doctor that students could look up to and could ask for advice, and I could teach and I could work with them. And I think, again, education is power. I just fully want to be immersed in education whilst I am a doctor. So I guess that's a, a very wishy-washy way of outlining what my future hopefully will be.
I think that that was a great way to put it. Yeah, I feel like I kind of put you on the spot there with what type of doctor as well. So I think you answered very well. I have one more question for you. Lots of young people want to create change and get started doing that type of work, but they might not know how to get started. What advice would you want to share with those people who may be listening?
Ooh, that's a really good question. I think for me, it's all about measurability. And by that, I mean, what outcomes do you want from that project? So I tend to think of projects as like, what impact do I want to make first before I actually start the project itself? So when I started Skin for All, I didn't start with the idea that, I want to make a website, I want to make a book, I want to make a podcast, anything like that. It was, I want to bridge the communication gap between professionals and patients. Okay, let me take a step back. How do I do that? Well, communication. How do we communicate in our modern age? Social media, websites, LinkedIn, videos, things like that. Okay, what is an accessible way of disseminating communication or communication skills? Okay, a website. Let's try that. Okay, go back. What do you want on this website? Well, I want something to be clinical. I want something to be I don't know. I want something to be like historical. I want something to be informative. Okay, and then like constantly taking those steps back from that like that last endpoint goal. I think for me was the way I started when I created Skin for All. And I'd also say, like I've been saying, I think throughout this episode, it's about trial and error as well. No one is perfect. No one, if you follow them on social media, you see these big influencers having these huge ideas, but you don't know the behind the scenes. You need to be nice to yourself and figure out ways in which you work, whether that's, I don't know, sudden bursts of just motivation, or if that's long periods of planning over a few months or years. You need to give yourself time and space to explore that side of you. You don't fit into somebody else's box. You need to fit into your own box. And so, if people are listening to this thinking that they want to create their own website and want to follow the exact steps I took, I wouldn't recommend that, because you are your own unique person. You have your own unique qualities and traits and skills that you bring to the table. So, being nice to yourself and understanding who you are as a person, I think is I guess, ultimately the best way in which you can achieve a project you're passionate about. You bring your own unique perspective to it and you know it better than anybody else.
I really enjoyed talking with Naabil and learning more about her work. I want to end this episode by highlighting her amazing advice about measurability and what it means to achieve goals, because I loved that part of our conversation. Learning lessons and becoming a better leader or a better version of yourself are wonderful ways to measure success, and they're wonderful goals to set for your future self. I found it so inspiring when Naabil was talking about her goals for the next few years in terms of the lessons that she'd like to learn and the skills that she'd like to develop and the ways that she hopes to support others. I think it's so important to ask yourself how you measure your own impact and what success looks like for you, especially when it comes to social impact work. And as you consider that question, also keep in mind Naabil's other advice, that change comes when you fit into your own box. Thank you so much for listening to this episode, and you can find Naabil on LinkedIn and Instagram, and I included those links in the description of this episode. If you want to talk about anything I mentioned, please reach out to me by email at lily@bethechangepodcast.org or on Instagram at Be The Change Media Network. I'm working on expanding Be The Change Media Network, which means bringing you more inspiring stories from amazing guests and new hosts and podcasts. If you enjoyed this episode, I would really appreciate it if you could leave the podcast a rating and a comment, because it will help these stories to reach, educate, and inspire more people. And I would love to hear your thoughts and feedback. Tune in for my next episode, but until then, be the change you wish to see in the world. Bye, guys.